Welcome to Dark Knight Films Reviews and another special ranking video.
And tonight we will be ranking the top 10 TV sitcoms. Now keep in mind that I will not have any 2000s onward sitcoms on this because I don't find many of them really that funny. So expect this list to consist of 50s all the way into the 90s, and that's it. If you were expecting the 2000s, might as well shut this off. They're not going to be on here. So let's begin this list with number 10, Saved by the Bell, which ran from 1989 all the way to 1993. This series actually began as a series called Good Morning Miss Bliss in 1987, starring Hayley Mills. But it became fairly obvious that the true star of this show was Mark Paul Gosselaar's Zach Morris. So after the run of Good Morning Miss Bliss ended, the series was retitled Saved by the Bell, and the only characters that carried over from Good Morning Miss Bliss to Saved by the Bell was Mark Paul Gosselaar's Zach, Dustin Diamond's Screech, Dennis Haskins' Mr. Belding, and Lark Voorhees as Lisa Turtle. And thank goodness that Lisa Turtle remained, because as much as I like Tiffany Amber Thiessen's Kelly Kapowski, Lark Voorhees is my favorite of the female characters on this show. I don't know what it was about her that I liked so much, but I did. And I was really happy when it looked like Zach was going to get together with her when they teased that in a couple of episodes, but then they, of course, moved away from it, unfortunately. But great series. Still have fond memories about this one, and that's why it makes my list at number 10. Coming in at number 9, we have Night Court, which ran from 1984 to 1992 for 9 seasons, and starred Harry Anderson as Judge Harry Stone. And it was because of his comedic talents and his magician skills that he brought all of that to the table with this character and made him so likable as a character. Alongside him for the ride is John Larroquette as Dan Fielding, and he is so damn good on this show. Other standouts, of course, were Richard Mall as Bull Shannon and Charles Robinson as Mac Robinson. I mean, those characters were just so fun on this show. Season 1 had Karen Austin as Lana Wagner against Dan Fielding, but she was replaced seasons 2 onward by Markie Post as Christine Sullivan. And as much as I like Karen Austin, I loved Markie Post. I loved her in The Fall Guy, so I was not against her playing Christine. This series is one of my favorites, and that is why it makes my number 9. Coming in at number 8, we have Cheers, which ran from 1982 to 1993 for 11 seasons. And, of course, it is led by the bar's owner and head bartender, Sam Malone, as played by Ted Danson. But this series was very much an ensemble piece with characters such as Norm, Cliff, Frasier, Woody, Lilith, and Carla. So when Diane Chambers, as played by Shelley Long, leaves the series at season 5 and was replaced by Rebecca Howe, as played by Kirstie Alley, there was no drop-off because nobody really cared about Shelley Long. It was about the ensemble. So it was no big loss because Shelley Long decided she wanted to go on to a bigger career and thought she was bigger than Cheers. So the series was able to continue on, and in my opinion, I think it became even better because I think Rebecca was a much better character, in my opinion. So that is why Cheers makes my list at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is Bewitched, which ran from 1964 to 1972 and starred Elizabeth Montgomery as Samantha Stevens, and she was great. I just love her portrayal of this character, the way she would do that little twinkle of her nose when she would use her magic. it was perfect. It just made her an adorable character, and I just loved her. A competing series around the same time was I Dream of Jeannie, which I like that series as well, but I don't think it's as good a show as what Bewitched was. And her chemistry with Dick York as Darren Stevens and Agnes Moorehead as Endora, her mother, was off the charts. Hanna-Barbera produced the opening and closing animation credits, and ironically, they even brought in Samantha as a character for one episode of their show, The Flintstones. And Elizabeth Montgomery reprised her role in that appearance. Now, when they replaced Dick York with Dick Sargent in the last 3 seasons, I think it hurt the series, and that is why it is at the position it is at right now. It would probably be a lot higher had Dick York been able to finish the series with Elizabeth Montgomery, because I don't think Elizabeth Montgomery had the same chemistry with Dick Sargent. Nothing against him, he did alright, but he wasn't near as good as Dick York, in my opinion. And that is why this series makes my number 7. Coming in at number 6, we have The Andy Griffith Show, which ran from 1960 to 1968. And it originated from an episode of The Danny Thomas Show, in which Andy Griffith guest starred as the character of Andy Taylor. And that led to the series becoming an actual thing. And I just absolutely, not only just because of Andy Griffith is great as Andy Taylor, but the thing that makes this show great is the Barney Fife character, as played by Don Knotts. Now, yes, B. Taylor, Francis Beaver, and Opie, Ron Howard, are fine, and the rest of the cast throughout the series is fine. But it is Barney Fife and Andy Taylor that are the characters that stand out and are the best. Now, as far as love interests to Andy Griffith's character, I preferred Ellie Walker, played by Eleanor Donahue, as his girlfriend in the first season. Although I don't have a problem with Helen Crump, played by Anita Corsat, but I just wish they would have left Ellie on this show. But this series did suffer, and that's why it's not higher on this list, when Don Knotts left the show, and it could not maintain the level that it did without him, in my opinion. So that is why it makes this spot on my list. Coming in at number 5, we have Leave It to Beaver, which ran from 1957 to 1963. And it starred Barbara Billingsley, Hugh Beaumont, Tony Dow, and Jerry Mathers as the Beaver. And even though Beaver is the star of the show and the parents are great, the reason this makes my list is because of Tony Dow as Wally. Wally is such a great character, and he gets such good build up throughout the series as it goes. He is the coolest brother that any young kid would ever want to have, and Tony Dow plays him so perfectly. So that is the reason why this series makes my list, simply because of the greatness of Tony Dow. Coming in at number 4, we have All in the Family, which ran from 1971 to 1979. Now, this series did sort of continue under a different name as Archie Bunker's Place, but I am not counting that right now. I am only counting All in the Family. Now, Carroll O'Connor as Archie Bunker was incredible. He is a character that has really bad vices that you would think would make you hate him, but his performance just makes you completely accept him as the person that he is. And there are moments where he accepts certain things that he is normally against. And that is what makes some of the elements that they put in this series work so well. Jean Stapleton as Edith is totally perfect as his wife in this. She is so good, as is Sally Struthers and Rob Reiner. This series, it shouldn't have ended with Gene Stapleton's Edith dying, and that's why I'm not including Archie Bunker's Place as the continuation on this, because in my opinion, it all ended when All in the Family ended. So that is why it makes my list at number 4. Coming in at number 3, we have Happy Days, which ran from 1974 to 1984. Now this one, a lot of people really are attached to Henry Winkler as the Fonz, and I like the Fonz, and I also like Ron Howard's Richie Cunningham, and many of the other characters are great in this. But to me, what holds this series together and makes it great is Tom Bosley and Marion Ross as Richie's parents, Howard and Marion Cunningham. They are the perfect parents. They are just so good in this series, and that is the reason why I can watch even the shows where Richie's off of the show and the Fonz is the main aspect of it. What works for me still is Howard and Marion are still there as leading characters in the show, and that's what makes me love Happy Days, and I will continue to watch it to this day because of how great they are played. Coming in at number 2, we have Sanford and Son, which ran from 1972 to 1978. Now this one, very much like All in the Family, it follows a character that has his own vices, but he is lovable and cool at the same time, and that is Fred G. Sanford, as played wonderfully by Red Fox. Now, I love Lamont as well, as played by DeMond Wilson, but I think other characters on this show like Aunt Esther, Grady Wilson, and many other characters are more interesting and cool characters than what Lamont is. But this show, I will watch it just because of how great Fred as a character is. And most of the time, his little schemes that he is trying to do, they fail, much like another series that I will mention here in a moment. But it's just fun watching it happen and watching the downfall that will eventually happen. You know he's not going to succeed. So, and that is the best part of watching Sanford and Son. So that is why this series makes my number 2 spot. And now for a couple of honorable mentions before I get to my number 1. The first is The Munsters, which ran from 1964 to 1966. I couldn't in good conscience put this series on my list, even in a top 10, just because it only lasted 2 seasons, unfortunately. As much as I love it, and I love it even more than the other series that was competing against it, which was The Addams Family at the time. But as much as I love the show, I can't put it on this list, unfortunately. Another show that I adore is The Honeymooners, which ran from 1955 to 1956. But again, much like The Munsters, it only ran for 1 season, so there is no real reason to put this on a top 10 list with series that lasted multiple seasons. So as much as I love Ralph Cramden and Ed Norton, I can't do it. So there are my honorable mentions. Now let's move on to number 1. Coming in at number 1, we have Three's Company, which ran from 1977 to 1984. Now, this series is my favorite sitcom of all time because of the character of Jack Tripper, as played by John Ritter. He was amazing in this show. Now, this show was originally based on a British sitcom called Man About the House, and they did take a lot of elements from Man About the House for this series, but I think it tweaked them in a way that made them work in a way that I like a lot better than that original British sitcom. And another thing that makes this so good, not only because of Jack Tripper himself and Janet Wood, as played by Joyce DeWitt, is the Ropers. Now, they were only on the show for 3 seasons, unfortunately, before they made this stupid decision to decide to spin them off into their own show called The Ropers. But these 2 characters were so good. Their chemistry with each other and their chemistry with Jack, Janet, and Chrissy is so good in this. Norman Fell and Audra Lindley are amazing in their roles. If they would have been able to maintain and stay on the show for the whole series, this show would have been even better. And hell, it's my number 1 right now as it is, so it's still great. Because who did they replace the Ropers with? They replaced him with another man that I already mentioned on my number 6 with the Andy Griffith Show. They replaced them with Don Knotts himself as Ralph Furley. Now, I don't like Furley as much as I like Stanley Roper, but Don Knotts just has this likability about him that makes the series still work while he's in there. Would I have liked to have seen the Ropers remain? Yes, I would have. And I think this series would have been even better if they would have remained. But unfortunately, they did not. So, that is why Three's Company makes my list at number 1.
What do you think of this list? Do you agree with our list? Do you disagree? Let us know in the comments down below. And as usual, if you enjoyed this ranking, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to click that bell icon so you can be notified about future videos just like this one. And while you're by the subscribe button, click that join button and become a Dark Knight fan. And if you missed last week's ranking video, check out the link above. And if you missed any of our other ranking videos, check out this playlist and get caught up.